All right, guys. Welcome right out of the gate. Let's get started. Evergreen Solar Webinar. This is the visual mock-up. I'm going to go over every single detail of the flow here. Break out a pen and paper, take some notes. Everything is going to be covered here, right? As far as the overall flow of what we have put together, and you're going to understand really quickly how this works really, really well. It all starts here at the top, right? Number one, Facebook, Instagram ad. Facebook and Instagram, Facebook in particular, has always been where I hang my hat. Not saying you can't use Google. We're having a lot of success just simply using Facebook and Instagram placements, short form video, as well as static imagery. We are going to be running an ad that's completely above board. In this methodology, this is pull marketing, not push marketing. We're attracting individuals, to kind of go through our door, if you will, attracting individuals with the ad that we run, specific to a certain market, highlighting some key points that we want to cover on a free information share, no obligation. If they're considering going solar in the Inland Empire, or whatever market of the country, we're leading with that and capturing real intent. Individuals are going to hit the landing page, right? The landing page is going to be congruent in the bullet points that are listed there on the landing page for what the actual webinar is going to cover. It's going to match the Facebook ad, okay? An individual has an opportunity to go ahead and register for the webinar. So interested individuals going to land on this landing page. They're going to register for the webinar. Our data shows about 48% of individuals that click through to the ad and actually reach the landing page register for the webinar. So there's really good numbers, okay? Moving forward, we have Facebook and Instagram ads. I mentioned that to the landing page. The landing page, again, explains the webinar benefits. The user is going to register. Number two, prospect registers and chooses a time. Very self-explanatory. Individual is going to provide good name, good email, good phone. Why? That's because they are expecting value, expecting something, right? And so we're going to be providing that in webinar. In order for them to partake in the webinar, an individual has to give us good information. They know that the link to enter into the webinar is going to be provided via email and via phone. We make sure they know that. So they're entering in good information. So here at the very beginning, you have targeted an individual, or put ads in front of an individual specific to the topic above board. That individual is interested enough to land on the landing page, fill out her first name, email, phone number, last name, of course, and they're registering. So you have an individual providing good information, interested in your topic, okay? They're going to choose the option for their webinar, right? We're running an evergreen webinar, meaning it runs 24/7, so there's always a just-in-time option for them, and it starts shortly after they have clicked through the actual ad and registered. Typically, it's going to run every 15 minutes on the hour. So an individual, that clicks through and registers at 12:14, in 1 minute they're going to be getting their webinar. That individual registered at 12:01, then in 14 minutes they're going to be getting their webinar. They're going to move into the webinar waiting room, or they're going to be notified, of course, if they have scheduled a webinar date and time in the future. You're going to also give them the option to do that. So they're going to get the information when they want the information. They're going to register when they want. There's going to be several different options, but they can always do the just-in-time webinar. Getting the information, striking while the iron's hot. So once that happens, obviously, if they're registering for the just-in-time, then they're all ready. The countdown is going. They're going to be taking part in the webinar in just a few minutes. It's an easy dovetail. They're in the webinar waiting room. If for whatever reason they decide that they want to choose a future date and time, of course, this is where the email and the SMS reminders are going to be going out in a sequence, reminding them that they need to show up for their webinar 24 hours in advance, 1 hour in advance, and 15 minutes before the webinar. They're going to be getting those reminders. So the webinar attendance and engagement. So the individual joins the webinar. Individual is going to be engaging with the content. And then very simply within webinar, there's a call to action, right? The call to action button appears in webinar, as well as dialog boxes so that they can actually ask questions. Now, this is a pre-recorded event, right? We've nailed it. We put in the work beforehand. We pre-recorded it. It's your brand. It's you providing the webinar, but they have the ability to engage. They can engage through polls. They can engage through directly asking questions in a dialog box. That information feeds over to you via email. You're notified. You know and understand somebody is live in webinar asking a question. Doesn't mean you have to get back to them right now, but it's all tracked. Okay, so you can get back with them with their question. Obviously, if they're engaging, you're winning, right? Because you can engage them back. Obviously, whenever we get to the call to action phase in the webinar, it is happening in duration much earlier than your typical webinar would, right? So like if you guys have taken webinars in the past, usually it's meant to sell a product, right? A service, coaching, you know, for instance, or a physical product. The whole premise is bring them along, you know, hold engagement, build trust, build the excitement, and at the very end they're pitching their price point with a call to action. We're not trying to pitch a price point here, right? The whole premise of this is not to sell within webinar. If we're selling anything, we're kind of selling ourselves, right? But we're not trying to sell solar. We're not trying to sell, you know, HVAC. We're not trying to sell water filtration or whatever vertical that you're in. The only thing that we're doing is bringing an awful lot of value to the table. And when the appropriate time comes, pursuant to the framework that we use, a call to action button is going to appear, and the presenter is going to breezily mention the call to action button, let them know what the next steps are, invite them in to look at the calendar, book a date and a time for, in the case of solar, a free no obligation quote. Okay, that is going to appear at a certain segment inside of the webinar, and it's going to stay true and hold there throughout the duration of the webinar, all the way through the Q&A phase. Right, the Q&A phase is designed to, it's an opportunity to list objections, questions, right, that you would typically hear in just about any market. Some of them might be the typical questions that you hear about roof penetration or warranty or whatever the case might be, right? But they are the questions that you typically hear in the market that you are selling in, and you want to list them out in the webinar, and you want to answer them in the webinar. This basically gives us the opportunity to rebut questions that we know individuals are thinking, right? But that, my main point is, call to action is going to happen all the way through the end of the webinar. And that call to action for booking a free solar quote has a timer, and the timer is ticking down to the end of the recorded webinar. So there's a little bit of sense and urgency. So the presenter is going to tactfully and very breezily mention this call to action as they continue to give value, right? And that call to action typically happens about midway through the webinar. Typical webinar duration, in the way that we design it, 50 minutes to 1 hour. So you're looking at, 25-minute mark, 30-minute mark, whatever the case might be. That's when the initial call to action, and it's perfectly aligned with the framework and a specific slide that we put in the framework to introduce that, okay? So moving on. So now we've kind of gone through the whole process, right? Individual registers. We know what brought them in. They're going to engage with the content. We have the perfectly scripted framework already dialed in. We're building trust. We're making the invitation. They have an opportunity to book a free solar quote. The numbers that we see are very staggering as far as the percentage of individuals that actually, whenever they get to the call to action, do decide to move forward into the booked appointment. Typically, we're seeing 28 to 38% of individuals get to the call to action and eventually book within webinar. Not everybody is going to book within webinar. No big deal. We're not going to lose them. This gives us an opportunity to really nurture them based on the fact that we legitimately own this lead. What I mean by that is, if you are of the sort, or you're of the kind that buys leads sight unseen, you don't know what has gone into generating them. You don't know what ad has been ran or whatever. You do not own that lead. I want you to understand that. The only thing that you own is data, right? Much more powerful if you run an above board ad, basically setting the intent for that ad, and then it matches the experience, not only the experience, but the narrative that you have created, branded as yourself, and you're taking them through a long form content like this. You legitimately own that lead because you brought them in on your own accord with your own messaging. They've experienced what it is that you want them to experience. Now we have an opportunity to nurture them effectively based on what they have seen. It's much more powerful, okay? Much more effective, much higher conversion rates. This is all predicated on the fact, this next line right here, webinar watch time tracked. So, on the back end of the webinar, right, on the webinar platform, we know every single individual, we see every single individual's information in the platform, and the platform actually tracks how much of the material that individual has watched. It tracks what that individual did, right? Did they click any call to actions, right? Did they submit a question? Did they submit a poll, right? The engagement is tracked, and the time spent watching the webinar is tracked. So what that means is, with that being said, when that happens, it allows for us, that information is on the webinar back end. And of course, it's going to be fed over to the CRM, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. On the CRM side, the automations, the trigger fires, the automations fire based on how much that individual watched. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So this leads into CRM data and lead segmentation. Because we know intimately what these leads have done with the information that we have provided and how much they watched, it allows for us to determine who are the hot leads, who are the warm leads, who are the cold leads that need to continue to be worked on, right? So here, webinar consumption data is then sent to the CRM, and the leads are segmented based on engagement, right? So 80 to 100%. If an individual watches 80 to 100% of the webinar, we know it, and it's fed over to the CRM. And because that individual has watched that much of it, let's say they watched 100%, but they did not book for whatever reason. Well, understand the call to action happens at a 50% mark, or maybe even a little earlier. So if the call to action was presented, but they did not book, but they stuck around for 100%, that individual is engaged. That individual is really interested. That individual was drawn in by what you're saying, and they're exposed, right? So with that being said, we can nurture them most effectively by providing them a completely different type of messaging geared more towards giving them additional value and being a little bit more aggressive in the way that we want to reach out to them to try and help them to see if they have questions. You can pick up the phone, you can call them and say, hey, John Doe, I noticed that on the 15th of February you watched 100% of the webinar. I'm curious why you didn't schedule your free quote. Are there any questions that I might be able to answer for you? Remember, you've got their good phone number. They provided it in the very beginning. These individuals are very contactable, right? So with that being said, nurture becomes much more effective. 50 to 80%, warm lead, same thing applies. A little bit of a different nurture, but still leading with value. 1 to 49%, a little bit of a cooler lead. For whatever reason, these individuals did not stay around for the majority of the webinar, so you actually have to try to work to get them to come back into a webinar replay or re-engage, through just having them re-register so they can actually get what they initially wanted to sign up for. Life gets busy, people get distracted, people, tech issues happen, whatever the case might be. Does not mean it's a wasted effort. We should nurture them appropriately based on what they saw. Okay, moving through. Automated nurture campaigns to drive conversions, branded emails, SMS follow-ups at the right time, right? I'm not a big fan these days of doing SMS follow-ups. I can understand it if you're buying a whole bunch of leads that you have no idea whether or not these individuals, what brought them in. You're just trying to get an appointment, so you're just going to try to reach out to them any way you can. And so desperation, send SMS, send email, whatever the case might be. SMS is a quick way to make people mad, piss them off, and basically have them opt out, right? So we have the ability to gauge and understand on the webinar side how much they watched, and then whenever they're pushed over into the nurture, we can monitor the emails based on open rates. If we understand that an individual watched a large segment of the webinar and now they're opening over the course of the next week or 2 weeks, opening up 80% of the emails that we're sending, those are indicators, and those indicators help guide your path towards understanding who is worth really chasing and following up with, and who is worth trying to nurture back into this funnel. Okay, so really important. The main point I want to get across here is owning the lead, owning the narrative, providing ownership of the experience that these individuals are going to be having whenever they come into your funnel, allows for you to get really, really detailed in how you nurture. And it's the 80-20 rule. Most of your effort is going to come from a certain segment that you really want to focus in on, right? That's what we're aiming to do here. It's all data driven, and the perfect mechanism for it is to provide long form content to build trust. That's why this works. Moving down, why owning the lead matters, drives higher conversions. Of course, if you're buying leads, cold, non-exclusive, there's low trust. Owning the lead gives you brand control, persona control. Whether you're a brand, sales and marketing organization, solar company, or if you're a high-level consultant, and you have several different fulfillment options and you're trying to brand yourself, these days with social media, if you're not branding yourself with everything that you do with your lead generation, if you're not developing that system, then you're really just relying on other people to feed your pipeline, and that is an uncomfortable place to be, right? So this mechanism allows you to completely own the lead, completely own and promote your brand, and get that, get the byproduct of that, which is an indoctrination to the individuals that are being exposed to what it is that you are trying to do. So really, really important. It's going to equate to better retargeting. It's going to equate to higher conversions. Again, these points. Retargeting is most effective because the lead recognizes you or the brand. You're going to have higher conversions, seamless indoctrination from the ad to the webinar to the nurture, and of course, you're controlling the entirety of the narrative. Individuals that are opting into this and they're, working with me to develop their webinars, they're selling in some really amazing ways. I have people that are selling solar based on investment strategies. I have people that are selling solar and basically telling the consumer everything that they need to know, bringing to light dealer chops and, points here is going to equate to $25,000 down the road. There's some really good strategies that are working really, really well. These individuals are using our framework, but they're penciling in the way that they have had success in selling, and they're packaging that and putting it in front of eyeballs, and they're now selling one-to-many instead of one-to-one. That's the important piece here. This system creates a pipeline of warm, educated, high-intent prospects, right? And so this is just a visual of the flow. Again, the Facebook or Instagram ad, you're going to just, put it out there. Join the webinar for information about going solar in this particular market. This is what we're going to cover. That ad is going to dovetail perfectly into the landing page, the registration page. We're going to match what the ad said. Congruency matters. Intent is the most important thing. We do not want to trick people into taking this webinar. We want people with real intent. Those people are going to consume a large amount of your webinar, and those people are going to move forward and actually, trust you enough to take the next step of discovery. You're going to earn it by presenting and performing in the webinar. Of course, they join the webinar and they participate. Coming down here, big secret sauce to this is the ability to track that participant's actions based on the percentage that they've watched, and then the nurture based on consumption, then fires. All right. So like if you're in the program, we provide the Go High Level snapshot. I actually, in the full training of this, I train to Active Campaign. There are templates over there with all of the nurtures already built out. You know, if you wanted to use Active Campaign, you could just import those templates and you could be good to go. Otherwise, we would provide a Go High Level snapshot. For those of you that use Go High Level, many solar professionals use Go High Level. Go High Level is a $97 per month subscription. We provide, in our full program, we just provide the snapshot so that you have everything ready to really effectively nurture these individuals based on percentage of time watched, as that is integrated over into the webinar backend. So, nurturing based on consumption. Different types of nurture goes out to 80 to 100% of individuals that have watched that amount. Those are the hot leads. Those are ones that we really want to focus in on. It's a low-hanging fruit, right? The 50 to 80%, the warm leads, a little bit more work, but they're still really engaged. You know what I mean? So if they did not book, but they watch 50 to 80%, they are warm leads. Your nurture is going to be really effective, but we're going to be leading with value in all these cases. Now, down here, under 50%, we kind of categorize that into a bucket. Individuals that watch 1% up to 49%, somehow they got distracted, right? And so they are going to be presented an opportunity to come back in for a re-registration or the webinar replay so that they can actually come back in, we can track them, you know, consume more of that information, and then we move them into a different nurture altogether. This is the flow, okay? And so it's not rocket science. It's based on a tried and true methodology, which is long form sales in the form of a webinar. Easy to promote, either organically, easy to promote with Facebook ads, Instagram ads, Google, whatever your choice platform is for driving traffic, right? At the end of the day, once they're there, the funnel itself takes care of the indoctrination, the trust build, the invitation, and then on the back end, the ability to track individuals based on the percentage that they have consumed allows for you to be very, very targeted in how you nurture these individuals. You are no longer guessing. You have an active pipeline living and breathing every single day that you can work towards the goal of getting in front of that individual and giving them the next steps. Because when you get on the phone with them or you actually have the booked appointment with them, understand they already have taken part in understanding who you are and what you offer for the better part of, you know, at least 30 minutes to an hour, right? So, and I'm speaking to those individuals that have reached the 50% mark up to the 100% mark. The individuals that are under 50%, they need to come back in. We have a different set of nurture for those individuals. Focusing in on the individuals that are most important in your pipeline allows you to be more efficient and allows you to exponentially grow your sales quicker with less effort. This is the flow. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this and we'll move on.